I would like to give the floor to the second round table, and the title is Institutions as a Shift Lever. You have only 20 minutes as a maximum for your presentations, and for all the persons, all the audience online, that you can send your questions to institutodanone@institutodanone.com. Good afternoon, and it's an honor for me as a member of the Instituto Danone of Spain to be part of the round table, to listen to the different possibilities to go from theory to practice. I'm going to introduce them. We have Mr. Fabien Santini online. He is the deputy head of the governance unit of agro-food markets of the European Commission. And together with Alexander Stein, he has written a paper that has been published about sustainability of local food, a review for policymakers. In this paper, he states that in the policy discussion, the promotion and the fostering of the local systems and also short food chains is very often the increase of the resilience of the food system in a general. For example, in the pandemics, when we were in our COVID-19 pandemic, several countries and also the Commission of the Regions fostered the visibility of farmers and other parts of the food system, and to make them visible for consumers. There's short chains, and in fact, it is not always the same. And if you are looking at the literature, you cannot put in the same level sustainability and proximity. It doesn't mean that if it is a proximity food, so the production is in proximity, also means that you have a low CO2 emission. Fabien Santini is going to give us his view from the perspective of the European Union. We have 11 million of farming farmers, farming houses, farming exploitations for the millions of citizens. And farmers are strategic and economic factors of the food chain. And secondly, on my right, we have Dr. Maria José Yusta. She is a pharmaceutist and she is also doctor in molecular biology. She is also head of the service of the Spanish Agency of Food Safety and Nutrition, and also of the Generalitat. She is talking about strategies and utilization of food associated with non-transmittable diseases and linked to the food, and some of the different possibilities in this idea from the farmer until our table, on the dish, on our food, what we eat every day, and also a special emphasis on childhood. At my left, we have Mrs. Gloria Cugat. She is the Deputy Manager General of the Inspection and Control of Agri-food Department of the Climate Action and Food and Rural Agenda of the Generalitat of Catalonia, which is the autonomous region of Catalonia, Barcelona, Spain, focusing on the agro-food impact, production, detection, limitation also of fraud and fake and in other infringements of the different legislations for food and nutrition. Without further ado, I give the floor Mr. Fabien Santini. You've got the floor. Thank you very much. I don't know exactly how the presentation is working. Well, good afternoon. I'm Fabien Santini, as I have been presented by the chair or the moderator of this round table. I am the deputy head of the governance unit of agri-food markets of the European Commission, and we are in charge of the legal framework and the functioning of agro-food markets in Europe horizontally. It's cross-sectional. and there are other specific units for other focus. This is a specificity of our unity. It's cross-sectional, horizontal, and that gives you this perspective. In particular, everything that is regarding the function of the markets and the regulations there, according to which the primary producer and also the processors and distribution can live together on this market in this framework, in this clear legal context. And that is also the reason due to which we have been part of this topic of my presentation, which is the topic which is rather very rich in literature, knowledge, information in the media, policies and politicians that use these two concepts, which are different, in fact, and I'm going to try to define a little bit more so that we can choose exactly what it means. Local nutrition models and short circuits. And then the relationship between these two types of organizations of the food chain. The relation also with the general sustainability, which is a general target of the European Union in the European Pact, and also the specific part of food, which is the strategy, or where we say the title is From the Farm on the Table, no? Short food chains. And the target is to have more sustainable European models, and that is a general target we have set. And when in this target, very often we talk about the local systems and the short supply chains of the food chains. And interesting, together with my colleague Alejandro Spike, we have analyzed the literature. How do they talk in the press about food chains, nutrition models, and so on, and what is fake news, and to see what kind of statements are really made in the media. And the background and the context, you will forgive me that this presentation is in English, and that was the first idea I had, to use English, but I will try to use the Spanish in this case. So the background we can see here, and the chair of this round table has been very explicit. Also during COVID time, much has been said in policy circles to increase the resilience and sustainability of the food systems. It is important to base our ideas more on the local systems of short food chains and so on. And sometimes in the mind and the thoughts of people who are maybe not experts in the topic, immediately they have this idea of food farms. When you are talking about the raw materials and the primary idea has to travel a lot, then it is not sustainable because there are a lot of commissions. When there are long geographic chains, in the examples we have seen in the media, we are talking about nuts, walnuts are produced in France, are going to Moldova, and there they come back because there they are processed and they come back without their shells. And then the market in France, it's unbelievable. How can they accept this? And that is the reason. That's why we have this idea, rather strong idea, that the short food chains are sustainable solutions and for better resilience. And we wanted to see if there is an evidence. It's important because there are so many things in the media. Sometimes you talk about local systems, but they think it is just next door. But food production systems is very well defined, in fact, in literature. When everything is produced, distributed, processed, and also consumed inside an identified area, one of the consequences is that the consumer very easily is going to refer to the origin of the food because he has this knowledge because it's coming from a small region. Then it's easier to have this concept and understand it. When you are talking about not very much processed products, when there are more than one ingredient, very much processed, it's more difficult. But in this concept of the short circuit, the short chain, short food chain, it's not a geographical definition, it is a definition that means that there are not many intermediary steps between the producer, which is the farmer, the agriculture, and the consumer, between the grower or the farmer, and the shortest one is when the farmer is selling it exactly on the farm. They can buy it there. There is another definition which is maybe a little bit clearer or transparenter. A lot of the member states of the European Union have given this possibility to subsidize these short food chains, and that's why they have looked for a definition to base the subsidy on, and this case is not more than one intermediary. So that is almost direct sale, and very easily it can be that the farmer sells the produce on a local marketplace or in a supermarket. It's a short chain. I don't know if it exists in Spain, but in France and Belgium you see a lot of supermarkets that have a stand and it's really a display where they have the local produce with the picture of the farmer behind it, and that is the evidence that this cheese is coming from the farm just next door. It's a really short circuit, and it is confounded a lot with the other topic, and is self-sufficiency in nutrition. That's a little bit different because that is an area, region where everything you need, everything that is consumed, and all the types of food are produced there. In this case, very often you have this confusion between what is local, which is, for example, an area with which the consumer is familiar, is linked to it, has a relationship. You're talking about a specific distance. You're not talking about 1,000 kilometers. You are talking about 30, 50, 100 kilometers, 150 kilometers in areas where they have a very low demography, very low population per kilometer. And you're talking about self-sufficiency. It's on a country level or region level, and that's different because very often they have this idea of an administrative entity which is also self-sufficient, when the local system normally doesn't have frontiers. It is not in Girona, in Catalonia, Perpignan. It's something that is coming from Perpignan, and you can still buy in Girona, and we are talking about two different countries. So sometimes these concepts are linked and combined with many other concepts, and that is this Gastro Nationalism, which is Gastro Regionalism. So that means that you consume only what you have in your region. If you talk about sovereignty, independency, about autonomous regions, and so escape a little bit this idea of the very strict two definitions I've given you, and to give you a little bit a broader idea for our debate. So that's why we have revised with my colleague these two topics in the literature. And we have seen there that there are many cases where we have both simultaneously a very short local system, short chain, and local system. Local system, not many intermediaries, but it's not the same. Short chains on the long distance. You can buy Spanish wine in Belgium, and then in fact it is a short chain because you buy it directly from the vineyard of the company, the wine company, and you buy it in another country. So that's not the same. When you have a complex chain of strawberries in Huelva, I've lived in Sevilla for 2 years, and you could buy the strawberries from Huelva in your neighborhood supermarket, and that's not a short circuit. It's not a short supply chain. You have the cooperative farmers in that sense, and as intermediary, then you have the wholesaler, then you have acquisition center, purchasing center, and so on. So not short at all. So you have to be careful there with the definitions. It's not the same. We have evaluated a bit. We have analyzed the literature, the two systems, and we have seen it in the 3 pillars: social, environmental, and sustainability. We started with the social one due to due to the reasons of classification, for example, food safety in the sense of the supply of food everywhere, which is considered part of social sustainability, and the supply of food. And in this case, what we have seen in literature, that's very often these short supply chains of local systems, both of them with their differences, very often are not the ones that can guarantee the supply, food supply for the society. And that has to do with the organization in Europe and in the rest of the world, of course. It is impossible to produce very close to a big city everything that is consumed in a big city. And I'm not even talking about the climate changes or differences. You cannot produce oranges in the north, for example, but also it is very difficult to organize the suburban areas with everything they need. And the authors have calculated that only a third of the world population could today, with the present systems we have in place, only a third of the world population could be supplied with or through local systems. Well, you will also see that in this case, and we have seen it in our analysis during the COVID, when the complexity of the long supply chains, when there are problems, and we had this problem during the pandemics because it was not easy to transport things from one place to another place due to health restrictions and norms. And for example, the employees of transport companies could not drive everywhere as before COVID. And we've seen immediately very fast that the short chains and local system had the advantage to react much faster to the demand of the urban areas, and there was an unbelievable increase of the demand, and amongst all the member states of the European Union, if you compare it with the time before COVID, so an immense increase. And another topic is also important is the price and also production costs. And in the literature we have found that long supply chains, well organized, have also an advantage with respect to price versus the local systems or short chains. There are other social impacts which are also very important, and in these short chains in particular, maybe the local systems a little bit less, but the short chains in particular, the fact that there is a direct contact between, or almost direct contact between farmer and consumer, reinforces other parts of the social social life, social impact, which in particular is the direct contact and the fact that you understand each other, that you have a relationship, the self-esteem, the development of the sense of community, be part of a community, and so on. And that has a positive impact on these kind of sustainabilities. And now if we come to the environment, that's an interesting topic, because that is something that has been planted in the minds of many people, because as if it is the idea that from an environmental point of view that it is much more sustainable in the context of the CO2 emissions, the greenhouse emissions, and so on. And it's intuitive. There is no transport, then it is more efficient. But in fact, transport is just a small part of the CO2 emissions of the nutrition system, of the food supply, and so on. And most of these emissions of the food system has not to do with the transport, but has to do with the product of it. Is meat, for example, talking about meat, everything which is fertilizer, manure, and so on. And diets of consumers that will have an impact on the origin of the food, and on the contrary, where you see that the total transport is less than 5% of the emissions of the food system. The opposite is with the long supply chains, very often much better organized from a logistic perspective, and if you compare the emissions per kilo of food, they are much more efficient, they have less emissions. So in that sense, here we have a kind of, a hot topic we must take into account. There is also another environmental impact in the short supply chains. In particular, they are going to require less packaging, for example, less packaging waste, and also the direct contact is going probably to impact the production of the farmers, improve them, and so on. But also the opposite, when it is concentrated in an area which not necessarily are the most productive one, then the production, the fact that they are close to the consumer, is not exactly the factor, but the global production is going to lower, is going to go to fall back a little bit. And in this topic, this is not the strongest point of the local systems if you compare it with this social aspect I've mentioned before, which is one of the most positive points. And the same happens with the economic ones. In the economic aspects, you can say that there is an impact and a multiplying factor of the local production systems, because they generate more local employment, more companies surrounding it. It is of distribution that are being founded there close to the production. That is a positive economic impact, which also can have a synergy with other economic activities, tourism, for example, which very often are well linked and well related with local produce, which are typical of the area, and so on.
We do not discard this price effect that we have seen, which for sure is also an important one. One of the issues is that these typical products of rural areas are recognized in several geographical areas, and we should not forget that these geographical indications, a significant part of its market, is very far away from the area of production. In reality, more than 20%, which has been exported far away, China, the US, due to some recognized products, and what's being consumed in specific regions is not the majority, but The Rioja wine, which is consumed in the Rioja, is nothing compared to what is consumed in the rest of Spain and the rest of Europe. So, this is the end of my presentation. To conclude, my conclusions is that in this debate, what we want to prove is that it is not true to say that in the local system is equivalent to sustainability. It can contribute and contributes to several aspects of sustainability. It does it more for economic aspects and social than environmental in a general way. It doesn't mean that in some organization the food system is possible, and it's determined by many factors, and because of its decisions has a very positive impact. But we cannot think a priori that anything that is short or local is good for the environment. The opposite, if we have to make a general statement, we have to be cautious. And also, if we want to work on sustainability and to prove the importance of food systems as a resilience, we have to follow this principle of common sense. We shouldn't place all the eggs in the same basket, because if the basket drops, everything is broken. And if we ensure diversification among short circuits, local systems, longer systems, more complex systems, more intensive systems, then the overall balance is what can ensure the resilience of food systems. And this is the end of my presentation, and I hope I have wisely used my 20 minutes. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, Fabien. Le pedimos que nos acompañe hasta el final, que será el turno de preguntas.
Where we will
Y
have a
ahora
Q&A
es el turno de María
session.
José
And now we're
Yusta,
going to listen to María José Yusta, who is going to give us a talk entitled National Sphere Public Policies for Healthy and Sustainable Diets.
Buenas tardes a todos.
Good afternoon, everybody. Well, first of all, I would like to thank the organizers of the symposium for having invited the Spanish Agency of Nutrition to participate in the symposium and to give us the opportunity to share with all of you the work we're doing related to the subject dealt by the symposium. Let me tell you that healthy diets are still a very important challenge, and now with the evidence we are gathering in the symposium, we have to add the criteria of sustainability, environmental impact, and also social and economic criteria. Well, first of all, although many of you are familiar with this, let me speak to you about the NOWS strategy for nutrition, physical activity, and prevention of obesity, launched in 2005, consolidated and reinforced by the law of food safety in 2011. An important cornerstone has been the creation back in 2013 of the Observatory of Nutrition and Study of Obesity. The Observatory is a source of information where we study the nutritional status of the Spanish population and evolution of obesity, especially in children. Also a platform where we gather agents following the same objectives as the NOWS strategy. The objectives are to invest to reverse the prevalence of obesity and overweight in Spain and reduce the high ratio of morbidity and mortality associated to non-transmissible diseases through diet by promoting healthy diet and the practice of physical activity. The NOWS strategy works with the implementation of several measures or initiatives with the aim of having a healthy and sustainable environment, working in different areas based in the school mainly, children, also taking into account social and economic inequalities and gender inequalities, which are the basis of these inequalities. Based on scientific evidence, at the observatory we carry out several studies to complete these measures. For example, a study of the evolution of obesity in children, the Aladino study, which is part of the initiative of the World Health Organization, vigilance of obesity among children. Also, studies of the makeup of foods, nutritional label, and also analytical determinations, and among other studies, consume of foods and the nutritional situation of the Spanish population, ENALIA. Also important to highlight that these policies follow the guidelines marked by international organisms, European Commission, OECD, and also the Agenda 2030 and ODS of the United Nations. These are 17 objectives, universal objectives launched in 2015, and among others, there is a special importance of diet and sustainability, which is the subject of our symposium. Let me highlight Hunger Zero and a complete transformation of food systems. Different institutions have developed strategies to help member states to achieve these ODS. First, let's speak about the European Commission, December 2019, the Green European Deal, which wants to introduce a transformation of the economy towards a sustainable economy in the European Union. So Europe by 2050 is the first climatologically neutral continent. Let me highlight the strategy from farm to fork, which approaches environmental challenges as far as food systems, promoting the development of healthy and sustainable food systems. For this, they are developing an important transformation with a legislative framework. They are coding the legislative framework related to food systems and to achieve these healthy and sustainable food systems. It highlights the relationship between healthy planet, healthy people, healthy society. Among the documents, let me highlight the Code of Conduct. Several companies have joined in a volunteer way, so the challenges of companies as for the environment and environmental agreement have become an opportunity for this transformation. On the other hand, the World Health Organization, together with the FAO, have developed guiding principles to implement healthy and sustainable diets, and the Lancet has gathered scientific experts in nutrition, sustainability, economy, and they have developed several scientific principles to help countries to implement and achieve OSD, and the Agreement of Paris. Let me highlight that in Lancet they define what is considered a planetary diet with production of foods within the limits considered safe. And these strategies have three characteristics in common. No measure or actor in itself can catalyze change. Scientific evidence is essential for change, and we need all initiatives from more restrictive to less restrictive. And there is a link between sustainability, nutrition, and human health. Non-healthy diets are a great burden for disease at an international level. Production of foods is the main cause of global environmental change, and the environmental impact generated by the consumption of foods has consequences on human health. Scarcity of resources, environmental deterioration, together with non-sustainable models of production and consumption, limit the health for safe foods, accessible, and also meeting the nutritional criteria in order to achieve some healthy nutrition. On the other hand, it is important to say that 1/3 of produced food is lost or wasted by consumers and retailers. It is also very important to consider that now food systems are not equal. There are important social and economic inequalities. Therefore, foods are a very powerful level to optimize human health and environmental sustainability of the planet. The IAT Lancet document establishes three main points to achieve healthy and sustainable food systems, to facilitate transition towards healthy diets with a minimum environmental impact, to guarantee a sustainable food production, and to reduce loss and food waste. The World Health Organization and the FAO have defined sustainable healthy diets. Let me go fast because we have seen the previous presentation. And as far as dimension health and diet, they're very important and relevant data. For example, study on the global burden of disease, which has been commented, data from 2017, 11 million deaths, 250 million years of life adjusted can be attributed to risk factors, and the main three factors are intake of sodium, low consumption of fruit and vegetables, and the main causes for mortality for diet are cardiovascular disease and cancer and diabetes mellitus. These data show that 60 million Europeans suffer from cardiovascular disease, 49 million diabetes type 2, and 74 million are considered people with obesity. Recently, the World Health Organization has published a report about the ponderal situation of Europe, and in this report they deal with aspects about the impact of the digital environment. It is very important, the impact of the digital environment in obesity, and also the impact created by the COVID pandemic in obesity, and finally guidelines to the member states to facilitate the path towards the fight against obesity. In this report, it is highlighted that obesity and overweight is the fourth risk factor of non-communicable diseases after hypertension, diet factors, and tobacco. Also, during the pandemic, the prevalence of overweight has increased in children and teenagers. Now, overweight in adults is 60%, 23% are considered obese, and the prevalence is bigger in the Mediterranean basin and eastern countries with low income. 1 every 3 children at school age suffer obesity, according to the Aladino study and our initiative. With the data of the effect of health and diet, different countries have developed nutritional recommendations based on food. They are very different depending on the country. We have to take into account cultural, social, historical, economic factors. But a recent report published by the EFSA, which is the European Authority of Food Safety, have gathered the common points all these guidelines, and we find the promotion of consumption of whole cereal, fruit, seeds, fish and water, so vegetable products. On the other hand, it is disadvised consumption of fatty acids, sugar and sodium. And this content in nutrients comes from the transformation and products of which consumption is promoted. Also, consumption of vegetables replacing red meat and processed meat. And finally, the consumption of vegetable oils rich in fatty acids, monosaturated and polyunsaturated. The World Health Organization has established some benchmark for healthy life similar to the ones we have just seen. Promotion of vegetable origin products, decrease of animal products, and also products of high content in grease, sugar and salt. Once we have known, or once we have explained what are the criteria for a healthy diet, let's analyze the environmental impact of this diet, which is considered healthy. Several studies with different indicators, but all of them have in common that vegetable foods cause less environmental effects than animal ones. In this study published by the Lancet, you can see that on top red we represent animal foods, and in green vegetable foods. And we take into account 5 markers, and in all the markers of environmental impact, animal foods, which are the ones marked in red, have a higher impact. Another study in which we analyze the environmental impact of the foods and health show that foods of animal origin in red have not only a bigger environmental impact but also a risk factor for health. And here we see foods marked in green, vegetal, with a less environmental impact and also a less risk for health. In green, whole foods, olive oil, of course, vegetables, greens and fruits. So the same plants and fruits, the same changes reducing transmissible and non-communicable diseases also reduce the environmental impact. Last Friday, recently, the Ministry of Consumption published a report about sustainability and consumption in Spain, where they highlight that nutrition is one of the sectors creating a bigger environmental impact. If we replace 25% of foods of animal source by vegetable source, we will reduce by 20% the depletion of the ozone layer and climate change. If we replace animals by plants in 50%, this reduction of the impact will be 30 and 40%. We know that healthy diets are also of a less environmental impact. What happens with sustainability? Another study where we have analyzed global sustainability of 3 dietary patterns, the Mediterranean one in green, I don't know if you can see it very well, Western, red, and pro-vegetarian in blue. Sorry, the opposite, blue, Mediterranean, pro-vegetarian in green, and Western in red. You can see that the diet with global sustainability is the Mediterranean diet, will be the graph on top. So the first one to the left is the global impact. To the right, we reflect the risk of suffering diseases. Blue, corresponding to the Mediterranean diet, will be more adherence Mediterranean diet and less risk of disease, and the same with the risk of criteria. The Mediterranean diet is the more sustainable global decision, taking into account environmental footprint and economic cost. Let's remember that the Mediterranean diet is very similar to the ones I have just described. High consumption of vegetable foods and low of animal, and olive oil as the main fat. Now I'm going to describe the main actions that we are carrying out at the NOWS strategy in order to achieve a transformation of the sustainable environment. I'm going to mention 4 actions which are recommended from the document From Farm to Fork of the European Commission. Reduction of sugar label and minimum criteria compulsory for distribution of foods in the schools. Let's talk about reformulation of foods. It's about reducing the content of critical nutrients or nutrients for which there is an evidence that they produce a risk of non-communicable diseases. The reformulation is present in the plans to fight against obesity, plans of the World Health Organization, European Union, and the OECD as an efficient initiative to reduce obesity. European framework, we have to highlight the creation back in 2008 of the group of high level of nutrition and physical activity. The NOWS participated in an active way, launched within the framework several documents which were very useful and help the member states to develop its plans of reformulation. Let me highlight the initiatives of reduction of salt, 2008, saturated fat, 2012, sugars, 2015, and also 2016, 17, and 18. Now we are implementing a joint action of the member states in which we talk about different strategies. We have selected the best practices. We are collaborating among different countries to implement them. We are dealing with three fundamental aspects: reformulation and restriction of advertising for children and purchasing in public institutions. In Spain, since the announced strategy, we've been working in reformulation since the very beginning. Last initiative happened the plan of collaboration for the improvement of composition, nutritional composition of foods and beverages, 182 sectorial agreements to improve the nutritional composition of foods and also the offer of menus outside the household. Sectorial agreements. All the companies which belong to this association have committed themselves to follow the same agreements. Almost 300 companies represented by 20 sectorial associations. For the manufacturing and distribution, they have agreed quantitative agreements, reduction of sugar, salt, saturated fats, and also qualitative measures, completing and supporting these quantitative measures of reduction. For example, advertising, use of portions, etc. With modern automatic distribution, we have agreed from a quantitative and qualitative point of view. The roadmap of the plan starts back in 2016 with the implementation of several studies to gather data, also based on scientific evidence. The Saénz carried out a study of food composition, labeling, and analytics, and it also gathered data of the sector outside the household, determining basal studies, average content, and then an objective of improvement, objective of nutrient reduction or improvement of the menus. 2017, almost 80 technical meetings with the different sectorial associations, and finally 182 agreements were reached. At the beginning of 2018, presentation of the plan, and then it has been reinforced by the signature of conventions and publication at the BOE. From 2019 to 20, companies have been implementing several agreements of improvement, and from Saénz we have carried out 2 evaluations, one intermediate one and a final one that we have completed and are about to publish. The plan of reformulation, let me highlight, I have already mentioned that, but it has been recognized by the World Health Organization, part of the document, as an efficient practice to improve the life of its citizens. As I say, let me highlight that the data are data evidence-based, besides a study carried out from Saénz and within the framework of the Observatory for Nutrition, leadership in the Saénz products, the involvement of small and big companies, transparency and communication along the process, and control of Saénz of the actions developed by the industry. Let me also highlight that the transversal nature of the plan reinforces the commitment of the government and Ministry of Consumption to improve the nutrition of the Spanish people and to fight against gender inequality. Evaluation and of 2019, results of this evaluation published in the web page, a study of composition of foods which go from different products, and we observe a reduction in the average content of 53 of the 67 agreements, and in 34 agreements representing 50%, the objective established for 2020 had already been reached. Within each category of foods, there is dispersion of content of nutrients. In one category where we apply the same technological limitations and normative, there is a difference in content, so there is range for improvement. Final evaluation. We have gathered all the data and we're about to publish them. And we have published a preliminary report where we have tried to reflect the outreach of the plan. And in this report, we gather the data of all the sectors related to the manufacturing and distribution, a study of composition of foods, going 3,221 products, 1,800 analytics, and we have gathered the responses of 174 companies, and involvement of 41 companies, affecting 7,348 centers, 39 companies, providing 6,100 schools, 1,588, 885 coffee shops, hospitals, etc., and 7 companies, 335 centers. And related to normal and modern restoration, the participation of 24 companies, meaning an involvement or an impact in 4,000 establishments. Automatic distribution, we have participated 53 companies. Let me also tell you that another reformulation is maximum levels, and they are compulsory on the one hand, the royal decree establishing contents of a maximum of salt in bread, and that's it. And related to advertising, let me tell you that in Spain there is a code of co-regulation between PIAT, Control and ESAN, including ethical rules for the advertising. Not what they are advertising, but the way they advertise. Reforms of the code, 2012, it was widened to younger than 15, communication on internet, and very important 2018 publication of the directive establishing the relevance on the content of advertising. Foods high in fat, salt and sugar. So from the ministry, a proposal of the royal decree has been published, limiting the advertising of foods and beverages, and we include some nutritional profiles directed to children for foods high in sugar and salt. Related to the minimum criteria, foods in schools, we've been working in schools. We have developed several documents in collaboration with ministries of education and health, documents, criteria, use of advertising campaigns, and the most relevant one, December 2020, it was authorized, ESAN authorized the national plan of official control of the food chain. And this program includes program 16, which covers schools and cafeterias. So from now on, the menus of the school, expanding machines and the cafeteria are going to be part of the official controls of the food chain. Very important, they're establishing minimum criteria that have to be fulfilled by these school menus, and they include a section of sustainability, 100% of fruits, offer of proximity, and a percentage of foods which are ecologic. Also, to provide legal framework, we have approved a proposal of the royal decree, and the consultation ended in 2022. And yes, the last thing I want to say is that Spain participates in frontal labeling. There is none from a Spanish perspective. Here you can find all the information about Nutri-Score governance, technical committees, and campaigns by the ESAN to reduce food waste. These are some of them, and that's it. Thank you.
Pues tiene la palabra la doctora.
I give the floor to Dr. Gloria Cugat with the title Strategy and Utilization of Food. Yes, thank you very much. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I will try Well, I'll try to recover a little bit of the time so that the moderator is not suffering so much. And the idea is that, well, they asked me to try to give an example of how with certain actions that are being carried out by the public authorities, we really are a kind of lever, no, a changing factor, and then link it with sustainability. So in that sense, I didn't doubt at all that I wanted to talk about a strategy on the utilization of food we have been developing the last years in our Ministry of Agriculture, Climate and Rural Agenda. So, first of all, I would like to thank the organization that they have invited me, and so I have the chance to share it with you, and that I can have this chance to convince you to turn into agents that defend the reduction of waste. We are a small group, and those that also follow online, I want you to leave this room being real fighters combating the food waste. Instead of explaining exactly what we do, I think it's more important to explain why. Why are we doing the things we are doing? And first of all, I would like to tell you that we have been a kind of leverage and also shift lever, we could say, but we wouldn't have been able to do it alone, at least in this case. And there has been a very important role that has been played by social society and many organizations and societies and different bodies when this was not a problem. In those times we have started, because now they are talking about the strategy from the farm to the fork, and now it is really fancy and really in fashion. But in 2011, 2010, we looked at as strange entities or people from Mars, but a group of people really fought to put it on the policy agenda. And that is how we have been starting to act. And I wanted to acknowledge this task done by so many people since 2010. Well, during this afternoon, we have heard a lot of things. A third of the food that is for human consumption in a world where, on the other hand, they are telling us to increase the production because we are going to become a huge amount of people. I don't remember the amount. In 2050, it will be 9 to 10,000 millions, so 10 billion of persons. So we have to produce a huge amount of products, and that on the one hand is an amount which is really very huge, which is the same as 1.3 billion tons of food we need and what is produced for human consumption. But then we heard how much is in the trash bin of vegetables and 5% of fish and so on and so on. Those figures, when they were published, a lot of people thought that we should do something. It was a real alert for many people. But in addition, this 1.3 billion tons of food we throw away, if this would be a country, it would be the third country of the world of producer of tons equivalent to 250,000 cubic meters of water. It's the same as if we have used the whole Volga River to throw away. Or maybe also the surface, agricultural surface of the earth for agriculture has been useless because what they produced has ended up in the trash bin, without talking about the economic things, no? The economic impact, what we have thrown away. And also what we have heard about the social drama we have in so many countries, and also our co-citizens. We have heard about figures in Spain, 50% of the households, more or less, according to that study, needed the food support. And when you think that with these amounts of food we are throwing in the trash bin, only reducing it to 25% of what we throw away, we would be able to solve the hunger and malnutrition problem we have in the world. If we look at these figures, then of course we must be a leverage. Of course we must be a tsunami of change. And there we have really a place where we must be all present. And that was our motivation, our motivational factor. Let me see if the slides, if I can make the slides function. And that's why we started to study and analyze these data. The figures I've given you, world figures, well, we nowadays have a lot of figures about the European Union. We are talking about 88, if I remember correctly, of tons of food that is thrown away. Spain is the 7th country of the European Union regarding the volume of residuals that are thrown away, food is thrown away. And in Catalonia, we also have the figures in 2012, where we have quantified the fact that 260,000 tons of food were thrown away of this supply chain, if you're starting with retailing until the households. So that is a very famous figure, 34 kilo per person per year that's thrown away. And that was a starting point. It was also a turning point on which we started to reflect about the fact that all of us should move, should start to move immediately. As I've mentioned before, it's not only the administration that is starting to move, also social society, the academy, the sector, everybody, all parts, all actors and stakeholders were starting to move. I'll go directly to what we do and what are our targets we have set. Our target is very clear, that is to work with the sector together in order to achieve these targets. We are aware of the fact that alone it's impossible. We have to work together. And another of the targets we have set, and which is essential also to achieve this, this prevention of loss of food and also food trash. Let's recover food. It's not €1 in a supermarket display. Behind it is a lot of people that has worked, a lot of resources that have been invested, water, land. There is also energy, so we must be aware of that, that this food chain, as our colleague from the European Union has mentioned, implies a lot of people, a lot of resources, and we must be aware of that, and we must recover the value of food, which unfortunately we have lost. So if I have too much bread, well, I can use it for something else. We have been dying of success, of the efficiency of the system. And then finally, this the production of food and circular economy, agro-food systems that are sustainable in line with everything we have heard here this afternoon. Our vision is to bet on sustainable agricultural system. It's our opinion that the agro-food system, either it is sustainable or it won't exist at all. So those initiatives we have mentioned in the previous roundtable, and also my predecessors of this roundtable, are essential. So the fact that we are here today in a symposium is a clear example, organized by a company as is of the level of Danone, and very important in the agro-food sector, and with a great awareness of the direction we have to take. And then also, of course, it is our duty to contribute to achieve the sustainable targets of the United Nations, not only the climate change, and also a production and responsible consumption. And I think that is really something important we have to achieve. That is really a target And it also means that we have to work with a global vision. It doesn't matter if we are very much aware of it, and if our agricultures, our farmers, our agricultural sector is not participating. And we must be really aware of that. It is like a kind of conscious idea. So we have to prevent the waste. And then in our household, we must be able to follow also this tendency. So that means that we must agree all and try to achieve something all together, a real result. Well, how are we doing it? We are doing it working in 5 very big areas. Two areas is together: information, knowledge. We are talking about 2011. That was the first time. In 2010 and 11, we almost didn't have information figures. We are also working on awareness creating in the whole society. I've mentioned also that we are now talking about the important issues I would like to convince you of, and then we, of course, we have campaigns, and we are a public administration, so that means that we regulate, we are regulators, and not only something we want to avoid. No, it's the opposite. We really want to implement it, to execute it. If we do not work together, won't be able to achieve it. Generating knowledge, I've skipped it. You have all our studies of quantification, and we have a very important target set because we are the department of the rural agenda of climate action and food. There we have the different kilos that are wasted, we have the figures, and we have worked also in the most important sectors of Catalonia, where we have the peach, pear, also the citrics. We have also worked in this sector of the orchards, tomato, and so many other vegetables, also courgette, and we will continue with fishing, because we do not only quantify, because kilos is not only the important thing, and because it's important to have indicators, but it's important to know why the reason and environmental targets have these losses. And this information is really what you have available with all the different organizations on European level that are working in that direction. There are multiple actions that have the aim to show the evidence of the problem and to put it on the agenda of the politicians, but not only on that agenda, but also of the agenda of the society, of our youth. And that's why it's so important. That's why we carry out these actions. We have this monthly electronic platform where you can also write us. We have a site. We have also different participations in events where they allow us the awareness creation, where we can talk about the problem. We also foster the collective awareness creating activities, for example, lunches or meals where you have a good utilization of the food, wasteless utilization of food. And we also promote actions of prevention, of waste production, and we promote the waste prevention. And we help also the companies so that they also participate in this target, this aim to prevent wastes wastes of production and of already processed food. Here you have a guide on our site and how you can implement this waste prevention plan, also agro-food safety. We also have the application to restoration sector together with schools, also for hospitals and also elderly homes, which are not available on the site because they are still being modeled and prepared, formatted and so on. But we have done it together with and also for this sector. We have also promoted the implementation and the recovering of the utilization of the producers in the agricultural field, using groups of people for the harvest after the official harvest. And you know also that in Catalonia in 2020 we approved with unanimity of our parliament. That's really something new. That is a law against food waste. It's a pioneer legislation, really, pioneer act. I could even say worldwide, because now we are really working on the development of the regulations to implement this law. This law, well, I wanted to talk a little bit more about this law, but we do not have time enough. You have the information on my site, where we have the duties we have and what is compulsory, why we say it is a pioneer law. I won't go into the details because we don't have time available. I just show it so that you can surf the site and find this information. And last but not least, the fifth one, which is to foster this shared governance. Here we are working together with the different commissions, the different departments also of the government. We have this cross-sectional commission also with the agro-food companies from the primary production until the distribution and the collective restoration. Also with the public administration authorities, which are in charge of these topics, with social society, and moreover also with the companies and entities of the third sector which participate in the distribution of the food bank and so on. I would like to highlight their dedication, their engagement in helping other people and helping to provide food and to supply food. Well, in this sense, if you agree, well, I'll stop here because it's rather late, but here you have a lot of information about the presentation, about the law I've just mentioned. And, well, with my last words, I would like to thank all of you, thank the organization also, and I would like to ask you that every one of us can contribute a little bit in this reduction of waste, of food waste and waste in general. Thank you very much for your attention. I would like to thank the speakers for their presentations and their talks. And first of all, I would like to tell you that the symposium has been organized by the Instituto Danone, which is different than the company Danone. Just to make this clear, that it is the Instituto Danone, the Institute of Research of Danone, who is organizing this convention, this symposium. Well, I would like to open the floor for questions and answers. Everybody also, the ones online, locked on, please, you've got the floor now. You can ask all the questions you want to ask.
Tengo dos preguntas. Una a Fabien Santini.
We've got a question for Mr. Fabien Santini. I don't know if I maybe have understood correctly or not. He was talking about the fact that a long supply chain in the end can achieve a lower price of the product. For me, in fact, that's a little bit contradiction, isn't it? Because you always think that the more intermediates you have in a chain, which are also sharing the profit and so on, then the price should be higher. And then I have another question for Maria José. I would like you to explain a little bit, because the NAOS system exists 70 years, according to the figures I have here, obesity. in childhood has grown, and it has been published a meta-analysis recently with the figures of the increase, which are of concern, and obesity and overweight in adults also has grown. And I would like to hear your opinion. Could you evaluate a little bit these figures that have been published? Yes, first of all, I would like to give the floor to Mr. Santini. Yes, of course. I would like to answer. Well, in fact, that is a component which we really can explain. We can explain it because it is a very simple explain. If it is a longer chain, normally it's also a more intensive one with more capital, with a higher size. It's bigger, where you can have scale economy, and then the production cost is reduced, and that allows this chain to have a better sales price, even with more intermediaries. And that is what I wanted to explain earlier also. If it's the same product with the same production system, same production expenses, then it's contradictory. That's true, because then a longer system is will have difficulty to have a better price. The better price will be the shorter one. But when they are simplifying the production process, the costs are less, and then you can do more or less the same as with the short circuits. And then there are also thousands of examples of particular cases and situations where it maybe differs a little bit. We cannot hear the question. The microphone is not on. Yes, thank you very much. Well, there are different studies that are evaluating the obesity and its development with different methodology. We have adjusted to the methodology that is used, the COSI one of the World Health Organization, because it is a measured study. It is the length and the height and also the weight of the children. The first year when it was integrated, we saw a reduction between 2011 in obesity and overweight, and now there is a flattening of this curve since 2015. So that means that's important. Take it into account, the sources of the information, and everybody knows also that obesity is a multifactorial problem. There are many factors that have an impact, and that's why the NOW strategy is used, and we are working in different fields. And as I've mentioned, the figures we have are the ones of the Anino study, and there is an evidence that shows us that there is a growing tendency, so a growing figure. Yes, I would like to insist on the response of the lower price, because when we talk about a price of a product that is going from one continent to the other continent of this world, which is a long supply chain, we cannot talk only about the monetary price, no, what is really what you pay, because the people that also are earning much less to produce all this product in other countries, that's one thing on the one hand, and then also what it means for the planet, for our planet Earth, and then re-establish that, no, what you have to return. In fact, we should establish this when we talk about price. But the worst thing we have been able to do as humanity is to try, with all our effort, to reduce the prices of the products, and that the persons that are producing it have less profit, less earnings. Fabien, you've got the floor. Yes, he is right, absolutely right in this outsourcing of economies, no, which are not represented anymore in the budget. My presentation was purely economic. I didn't want to go beyond it with the environmental impact and also the parts that are not represented in this price. But I would like to give some details. Not everything is so bad when you are reducing a price. It is not always bad to reduce the expenses of production. And it's also true that productivity in general and the increase of all the economic systems allows us to live better than 100 years ago. The problem is that we have to avoid the counter effects I have mentioned. And I think that the my two predecessors have talked a lot about it in the previous round table, because we can do much more to avoid this waste, because we can reduce the price of the food production with the effect, so avoiding this possible effect of damaging our environment. But in France we say, well, if they say in English, to throw the baby out with the bathwater. And to increase the production and reduce the production expense is not only bad. I have a question for Gloria Cugat, who has talked about the Catalan law, which is the 3/2020 law, which is prevention of the production of waste. How does it affect the restoration sector? Well, in general, generally speaking, this whole chain with all the companies except the micro enterprises, what they will have to do is that the duty, in fact, is a plan of waste prevention. They have to quantify production, food waste, possible waste, and so on. And it is their duty to follow a utilization hierarchy of the products they are not going to use. They must have a destination. For example, if you're going to use it for human use, then in the end it must really feed humans and not animals. If it is to feed animals, then it cannot be in our food chain. Otherwise, it can go to the other techniques of food recycling, waste recycling, and so on. Restoration, specifically, they have also the duty to offer consumers the possibility to take home in recyclable packagings the food they have not consumed while they are at a restaurant, for example, so that we do not have to throw away, so that you do not produce this waste. And so that you can eat what you need or produce what you need and consume what you have asked for. Do not start to order and order. If you just want half a dish, then that you have the possibility to just order half of it or share it, or you take it home and then you can use it in the evening for dinner or the next day, or in the end you can give it to another person even who can maybe need it. That is so more or less generally speaking. I don't know if there are further questions from the audience or streaming. Well, yes, one question. Yes, thank you, it works fine. I've got a question for Gloria Cugat, because now as you have been working on it several years, these measures to reduce waste from food and so on, have you maybe already analyzed it, and have you achieved certain results or figures to show us? Talking about now, I don't know if well, they have made a big effort, but I don't know if the benefit of the reduction of the volume has really been achieved. Is it been enough versus the investment that has been made? That's what I was thinking about a little bit. Also globally, this whole effort from the ministry of our Catalan government, all these campaigns, okay, it has turned into a reduction of waste, that's true, but figures you mean of quantification? No, we don't have them available. The first quantification I mentioned before, which we did during the phase from wholesale to the households, which was done by the waste processing companies. In fact, they are now in the second wave of quantification, but these quantifications are very complex because you have to process the garbage. You have to go to the the trash you have. It is very expensive in time and money to analyze everything. Our forecast was to have figures very soon, but well, then we had a pandemic and this study stopped. We are continuing now. We started last year our chart, and then the 4 years before that we have the first figure. We have not had time to look at the second wave of figures, but what I can tell you, which is a qualitative appreciation, is what I have seen is a radical change in the attitude of all the stakeholders of the food chain. In the past, starting with each and every one of us, when we were talking about it, oh, no, I don't throw anything away. No, of course not. We really take advantage of everything. At home, I never throw anything away. At the company, never. Then I would throw away money. I'm efficient. But now, everybody has it on the agenda. Everybody knows very clearly that something must be done. So figures, unfortunately, are not available so far. But I think that this change of attitude, well, I'm convinced of it, that it will bring figures. But there are other studies of consumers of the Ministry of Agriculture. They have been published, and ICOR is also an association of companies, and have also organized an analysis amongst their associates, their members. They also have published figures. But we are talking about figures that are getting more and more difficult to reduce, because that means that we are improving also, that we are improving in our attitude in what we are doing. I hope that next symposium I will be able to bring some figures. Professor Salas, you have the one to address us with the last words of the symposium. Well, I apologize, but maybe I'm a bit utopic, because in the end you think that maybe we should be more interventionist. No? And I apologize, because I know that very often when you talk about intervening, well, it damages a lot of sectors, and then there is a lot of opposition, of course, a lot of resistance. But the food waste, well, maybe you could touch the VAT of the food. We have never touched it in this country, and we have never established the VAT of food based on public health. The same happens with prices of food. Maybe we will a day will come that this price of the food, which has been transported from one part of the globe, comes here. And then we also include all these loads, all these impacts for the planet. Will we have taxes that will be used and can be used to go against this exploitation of people, of workers in the third world, to bring cheaper products to the developed countries? That is the big question I provide. You don't have to answer the question, but I think that these are the thoughts we should start thinking about. We must be more interventionist. We must intervene. Well, then, with this thought, we say goodbye and we close the event. Tomorrow, we continue. Those of you who will come also, we will continue to learn, to share, trying to improve food and nutrition for us and for the planet. Thank you very much for your attendance. Good evening.